Jake Morrison stood in the long line outside the recruitment center in downtown Houston. The building was packed with people from all over America who wanted to join the fight. Above them, giant screens showed images of destroyed colonies and burning planets. The enemy called themselves the Vorthak, and they had been attacking human settlements across 3 different star systems for the past 6 months. The line moved slowly as each person went through medical tests and background checks. Jake had been a pilot in the Air Force for 8 years before this chance came up. When the Galactic Council announced they needed human volunteers for their military force, Jake knew he had to sign up. He had always dreamed of flying between the stars, and this was his opportunity. A woman behind him was reading from her phone about the latest attacks. The Vorthak had hit another farming colony on Kepler 442b just last week. 5,000 people were missing, and the planet was left burning. The news reports said the aliens took prisoners, but nobody knew why. Some experts thought they were studying humans, but others believed something much worse was happening. Jake finally reached the front desk, where a tired-looking sergeant took his papers. The man looked at Jake's Air Force record and nodded with approval. Within 2 hours, Jake was on a transport ship heading to the main training facility on Luna Base. The moon had been turned into a massive military complex where humans from Earth were learning to fight alongside alien species. The training lasted 6 months, and Jake met his squad during the first week. Tony Rodriguez came from a family of Marines in Texas and had joined because his brother was killed in the first Vorthak attack. Amy Parker was a former NASA engineer from Maine who wanted to use her technical skills in space combat. Steve Johnson had been a police officer in Detroit before volunteering to fight aliens instead of criminals. Their instructor was Captain Lisa Warren, who had fought in the Mars Rebellion 5 years earlier. She was tough and direct but fair to everyone in the training program. Captain Warren taught them how to use plasma rifles and energy shields. She showed them how to move in zero gravity and how to breathe in different atmospheric conditions. Most importantly, she taught them how to work with the other alien species in their coalition. The alien allies were strange to look at, and even stranger to work with. The Zephyrians looked like large reptiles that walked on 2 legs. They were excellent at engineering and could fix almost any broken equipment. The Helix were insect-like creatures with 6 arms and could calculate battle plans faster than any computer. There were also the Vorthak enemies, who were described as tall crystalline beings that moved like liquid metal. During training, Jake noticed something odd about how the aliens treated the human soldiers. The Zephyrians would not make eye contact with humans during joint exercises. When humans entered a room, the Helix would stop talking and move to the corners. Even the instructors from other species seemed nervous around the human trainees. Jake asked Captain Warren about this behavior, but she said it was normal for different species to need time to adjust to each other. The final month of training took place on a space station orbiting Jupiter. Jake and his squad learned to operate in the vacuum of space and practiced boarding enemy ships. They studied Vorthak technology and learned about their weapons and tactics. According to the briefings, the Vorthak were savage predators who consumed their victims in religious ceremonies. They had been terrorizing the galaxy for hundreds of years before humanity joined the galactic community. Jake felt ready when graduation day arrived. Captain Warren called his squad the best she had trained in years. They were assigned to the human flagship USS Liberty, which would lead the assault on Vorthak territory. The ship was massive, with a crew of 12,000 humans and 2,000 alien allies. Jake had never seen anything so impressive in his life. On their last night before departure, Jake sat in the observation deck with his squad. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see Earth floating in the darkness below them. Tony talked about his family in San Antonio and how proud they were of him. Amy showed them pictures of her hometown in Maine and promised to take them fishing there when the war was over. Steve was quiet, but Jake could tell he was thinking about the police partners he had left behind. The next morning, they received their final briefing from Admiral Frank Collins, who commanded the entire human fleet. The admiral was an old man with gray hair and serious eyes. He told them they were about to make history as the first humans to fight in an interstellar war. He said the galaxy was counting on them to stop the Vorthak threat once and for all. As the UFS Liberty jumped into hyperspace toward the Kepler 442 system, Jake felt a mixture of excitement and fear. He was finally going to see real alien worlds and fight in space battles. But he also wondered if he was truly ready for what they might find out there among the stars. The journey would take 3 days, and Jake spent most of that time checking his equipment and reviewing tactical plans. During the trip, Jake noticed that the alien crew members seemed more nervous than the humans. The Zephyrian engineers worked in groups and spoke in whispers. The Helix tactical officers spent extra time in their meditation chambers. When Jake asked one of them about their behavior, the alien just said that humans were different from other species in ways that would become clear soon enough. As they approached their destination, Jake stood on the bridge next to Captain Warren and watched the stars ahead of them. Soon they would meet the enemy and discover what real space combat was. Jake had trained for this moment his entire adult life, and he was ready to serve his species with honor. He had no idea that everything he believed about humanity and their place in the galaxy was about to change forever. The battle alarm woke Jake from a deep sleep at 0400 hours ship time. Red lights flashed in the corridors as the crew ran to their stations. Through the hull, Jake could feel the vibrations of the ship's massive engines powering up for combat. This was it, their first real fight against the Vorthak forces that had been terrorizing human colonies. Captain Warren's voice came through the intercom system, telling all Marines to report to the launch bays. Jake grabbed his plasma rifle and followed Tony, Amy, and Steve down the corridor toward their assigned shuttle. Around them, other squads were doing the same thing, checking weapons and putting on their armored suits. The mood was tense but focused as everyone prepared for their first taste of real combat. In the launch bay, Jake could see the enemy through the large viewing windows. The Vorthak fleet consisted of 12 ships that looked like giant crystals, floating in space. They were beautiful in a strange way, but Jake knew they contained the monsters who had killed thousands of human colonists. The human fleet had them surrounded, and several Vorthak ships were already damaged from the initial attack. Their target was a medium-sized Vorthak cruiser that had lost power to its engines. Intelligence reports said the ship contained important prisoners and tactical information that could help end the war faster. Jake's squad was part of a boarding party that would capture the ship while other teams attacked different targets. Captain Warren would command the operation from the main assault shuttle. The ride to the enemy ship took 20 minutes through the vacuum of space. Jake looked out the window and saw the battle raging around them. Human fighters were attacking Vorthak vessels with missiles and energy beams. Some alien ships were exploding in bright flashes while others tried to escape toward the edge of the star system. It was like watching a movie, except this was real and people were dying. When they reached the Vorthak cruiser, Jake could see the damage from the initial attack. Large holes had been blown in the crystalline hull, and atmosphere was leaking out into space. The boarding tubes attached to the ship with a loud clang, and Captain Warren gave the order to advance. Jake followed his squad through the narrow tunnel that connected their shuttle to the enemy vessel. The inside of the Vorthak ship was unlike anything Jake had expected. Instead of metal corridors like human ships, everything was made of the same crystal material as the hull. Strange lights pulsed through the walls, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. The air was thick and smelled like flowers mixed with electricity. Jake's suit automatically adjusted his breathing mixture to compensate for the alien atmosphere. They moved deeper into the ship, following their tactical maps and looking for signs of the enemy. According to their briefings, the Vorthak were fierce, warriors who would fight to the death rather than surrender. Jake expected to face savage aliens wielding advanced energy weapons. His squad moved carefully through each corridor, ready for an ambush at any moment. The first Vorthak they encountered was huddled in what looked like a storage room. The alien was tall and graceful with skin that looked like polished glass. When it saw the human soldiers, it made a high-pitched sound like wind through metal pipes. Instead of attacking, it threw down what appeared to be a weapon and pressed itself against the far wall of the room. Amy raised her rifle, but the alien began, speaking in broken English through some kind of translation device. The words were hard to understand, but Jake caught phrases like, "Please no harvest" and "mercy" from Deathwalkers. The alien was clearly terrified, and Jake could not understand why. According to their training, the Vorthak were supposed to be the predators in this war. They secured the first alien and continued through the ship. In every section, they found the same thing: Vorthak crew members who surrendered immediately when they saw human soldiers. Some of them were injured from the battle, but others appeared to be hiding in storage areas and maintenance shafts. None of them tried to fight, and all of them seemed genuinely afraid of the human boarding party. In the ship's command center, they found the captain and his senior officers. These Vorthak were wearing what looked like ceremonial armor made of the same crystal material as their skin. When Captain Warren entered the room with her helmet removed, the alien captain made a sound like breaking glass and fell to his knees. Through the translation system, he kept repeating, "The harvest comes early, and we submit to the void spawn." Jake was confused by the alien's behavior and asked Captain Warren what harvest meant. She was studying her tactical display and frowning at the reports coming in from other boarding parties. Every human team was reporting the same thing: Vorthak forces that surrendered without fighting. The few casualties were from accidents during the boarding process, rather than combat with the enemy. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear other Vorthak vessels in the fleet. The translation computers were working to decode their messages, and what Jake heard made no sense. The aliens were calling humans the endless hunger and planet devourers. They spoke about humanity like they were describing demons from their worst nightmares, rather than soldiers from a recently discovered species. Captain Warren received new orders from Admiral Collins on the flagship. The entire Vorthak fleet was retreating from the system without continuing the fight. Several ships had already jumped to hyperspace, while others were broadcasting surrender messages. In less than 4 hours, the human fleet had achieved total victory without losing a single ship or soldier. Back on the USS Liberty, Jake sat in the mess hall with his squad, trying to understand what had happened. They had trained for months to fight savage alien predators, but instead found terrified beings who gave up at the first sight of human soldiers. Tony thought maybe the Vorthak were cowards, but Amy pointed out that cowards do not usually conquer entire star systems. Steve had been listening to the intelligence reports from the captured Vorthak officers. According to their testimonies, humanity had a reputation in the galaxy that preceded their official first contact. The aliens spoke about humans like they were legendary monsters that appeared in their ancient stories. They called Earth the Death World, and humans the children of the Void. That night, Jake could not sleep and spent hours walking the corridors of the ship. He passed by the holding areas where the Vorthak prisoners were being kept. Through the transparent aluminum barriers, he could see the aliens sitting quietly in groups. When he approached, they would look at him with what appeared to be a mixture of fear and respect. One of them even bowed when Jake walked past. Jake began to realize that everything they had been told about this war might be wrong. The Vorthak were not the savage predators described in their briefings. Instead, they acted like prey animals who had been cornered by a superior predator. The real question was why they saw humans as something to be feared rather than just another spacefaring species. As Jake finally returned to his quarters, he wondered what other secrets the galaxy might be hiding about humanity's true nature. Jake found High Coordinator Vex High in the diplomatic quarters of the USS Liberty 3 days after the battle. The alien liaison was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow in the ship's artificial lighting. Vex High had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on its face, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Jake had requested this meeting through official channels because he needed answers about what happened during the boarding operation. The Vorthak prisoners were still refusing to explain why they surrendered so easily. Every time human soldiers approached them, the aliens would become agitated and start making those strange keening sounds. It was clear they were terrified, but nobody could understand why. Vexahai gestured for Jake to sit across from it in the small conference room. The alien's 4 eyes focused on Jake with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. When Jake asked about humanity's reputation among the galactic species, Vexahai was quiet for a long time. Finally, the alien spoke in careful, measured words about ancient records and old stories that most civilizations preferred not to discuss. According to Vexahai, the galactic community had known about Earth for thousands of years before official first contact. Long-range surveys had detected the planet and its inhabitants, but no species had attempted to make contact. The reason was simple. Humans had a reputation that preceded them across the galaxy. They were known as the Endless Hunger and the Planet Devourers in the old records. Jake asked what those names meant, and Vexahai explained that every few centuries, a human ship would appear at the edge of known space. These ships were always damaged, and their crews were always desperate. The humans would ask for help repairing their vessels and gathering supplies. Galactic species would assist them out of compassion, but the humans never stayed in one place for very long. The problem was what happened after the humans left. Within a few years, entire star systems would go silent. When investigation fleets arrived, they would find dead worlds with all life stripped away. The oceans would be empty, and the atmosphere would be toxic. Cities would be reduced to ash, and even the plant life would be gone. It looked like something had consumed everything on those planets. Vexahai showed Jake holographic records from these dead worlds. The images were disturbing, even though they were thousands of years old. Planets that had once supported billions of beings were now lifeless rocks floating in space. The investigators could never determine what had killed these civilizations, but they always found traces of human technology in the ruins. The galactic community eventually established protocols for dealing with human contact. If a human ship appeared in their territory, they would provide minimal assistance and encourage the humans to leave as quickly as possible. No species was allowed to give humans detailed star charts or information about populated worlds. They hoped that by limiting human knowledge, they could protect their civilizations from whatever fate had befallen the dead planets. Jake was shocked by these revelations and asked if the galactic leaders truly believed humans were responsible for those deaths. Vexahai explained that the evidence was circumstantial, but the pattern was clear. Human contact was always followed by planetary destruction within a relatively short time period. The galactic community had no choice but to treat humanity as a potential threat. During their conversation, Dr. Helen Brooks arrived with data files that she wanted to share with both Jake and Vexahai. Dr. Brooks was the expedition's chief medical officer and xenobiologist. She had been studying human physiology compared to other galactic species, and her findings were disturbing. According to her research, humans were biological anomalies that should not exist according to galactic standards. Dr. Brooks explained that most intelligent species required very specific environmental conditions to survive. They needed particular atmospheric compositions, narrow temperature ranges, and carefully balanced diets. Any significant deviation from these requirements would kill them within hours or days. Humans were different because they could adapt to almost any environment and consume almost any organic material for nutrition. The doctor showed them comparative data on pain tolerance between species. The average galactic citizen would lose consciousness from injuries that humans would consider minor. Human bones were denser, human muscles were stronger, and human cardiovascular systems were more efficient than any other known species. From a biological perspective, humans were designed to be predators on a level that the galaxy had never seen before. Vexahai confirmed that these physical advantages were part of why other species feared humanity. The old records described humans who could survive in the vacuum of space longer than should be possible. There were stories of humans healing from wounds that would kill other beings and fighting effectively even when severely injured. To most galactic species, humans appeared to be nearly indestructible. Dr. Brooks had also been analyzing psychological profiles of human volunteers compared to other species in their coalition. The results were equally disturbing. Most galactic civilizations would suffer complete social breakdown if they lost more than 5% of their population to war or disaster. Humans had historically fought conflicts where they lost 30% or more of their people and continued fighting, until victory was achieved. Jake asked about the Vorthak specifically and why they seemed so afraid of human soldiers. Vexhai explained that the Vorthak were actually scavengers rather than conquerors. They fed on the life energy of dying worlds and civilizations that were already collapsing. The Vorthak had never attacked a healthy civilization because they lacked the military strength to defeat an organized defense. The reason the Vorthak had attacked human colonies was desperation rather than aggression. Their species was starving because they had consumed most of the dead worlds in their territory. When they discovered human settlements, they thought they had found easy prey. The Vorthak assumed that humans would be as weak as other galactic species and would collapse quickly under pressure. Instead, the Vorthak discovered that humans were everything the old stories claimed they were. Human colonies fought back with a ferocity that terrified the alien attackers. Even when outnumbered 10-to-1, human defenders would continue fighting until the last person was dead. The Vorthak had never encountered resistance like this, and they realized they had made a terrible mistake. Dr. Brooks showed them intelligence reports from captured Vorthak officers. The aliens had been monitoring human history through long-range sensors for decades before the attacks. They had watched human wars, nuclear weapons testing, and environmental destruction. The Vorthak conclusion was that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to spread beyond their home planet. According to the captured aliens, the attack on human colonies was a preemptive strike born of desperation and fear. The Vorthak believed that if humans were allowed to expand into the galaxy, they would eventually consume every other species, just like the old stories described. The aliens thought they were fighting for the survival of all galactic civilization. Jake sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything he had learned. The war was not about human colonies being attacked by alien predators. Instead, it was about the galaxy's most feared species finally leaving their home world and confirming every nightmare that other civilizations had about them. Humanity was not the victim in this conflict. They were the monster that everyone had been, afraid would eventually wake up. As Jake left the meeting, he realized that his entire understanding of the war had been wrong. They were not fighting to protect innocent human settlers from savage aliens. They were fighting to prove that humanity deserved a place among the civilized species of the galaxy. The real question was whether humans could control their nature long enough to convince the galaxy that they were not the monsters from the old stories. The human fleet moved deeper into Vorthak territory over the following weeks, and Jake witnessed something that changed his understanding of warfare forever. Entire Vorthak colonies would surrender at the first sight of human ships appearing in their star systems. The aliens would broadcast surrender messages before the human fleet even entered weapons range. It was like they were so terrified of fighting humans that they would give up rather than risk a battle. Jake's squad was part of the ground assault team that took control of the Vorthak mining world called Dusthaven. The planet had a population of 2 million aliens who worked in crystalline mines that produced energy cores for their fleet. When the human transports landed at the main spaceport, they found the entire population waiting for them in organized groups with their hands raised in surrender. The Vorthak civilians looked nothing like the savage predators described in human intelligence reports. They were tall and graceful with crystalline skin that reflected light in beautiful patterns. Many of them appeared to be families with young children who stayed close to their parents. When the human soldiers approached these groups, the aliens would kneel down and make soft musical sounds that seemed to be some kind of prayer. Amy had been studying the Vorthak language during their journey, and she could understand some of their conversations. The aliens were calling the humans Void Walkers and Deathbringers, but they also used terms that translated as Judgment Day and the Final Harvest. It was clear that the Vorthak saw the human arrival as some kind of apocalyptic event that had been prophesied in their ancient texts. Tony found the alien behavior disturbing and asked Captain Warren why an entire planet would surrender without firing a single shot. The captain explained that intelligence reports suggested the Vorthak had a hive mind mentality that made them incapable of independent resistance. Once their leaders decided to surrender, the entire population would follow. That decision without question. Jake was not convinced by this explanation, because the Vorthak did not act like mindless drones. During the occupation, he observed alien families taking care of their children and individuals making personal decisions about their daily activities. The Vorthak seemed to have the same range of emotions and intelligence as any other species. Their surrender appeared to be based on genuine terror rather than programmed obedience. The breakthrough came when Jake's squad was assigned to secure the planetary archives in the capital city. The building was a massive crystal structure that contained the collected history and knowledge of the Vorthak civilization. Amy had become skilled at reading their written language, and she began translating sections of their historical records while the other squad members provided security. What Amy found in those archives changed everything they thought they knew about the galaxy and humanity's place in it. The Vorthak had detailed records spanning thousands of years that documented encounters between various galactic species and humans. These were not the vague legends that Vexhai had mentioned, but specific accounts with dates, locations, and witness testimonies. The earliest records described human ships appearing at the edges of Vorthak territory over 3,000 years ago. These humans claimed to be explorers from a distant world who had become lost during a deep space mission. The Vorthak had provided them with supplies and star charts to help them find their way home. The humans had seemed grateful and peaceful during their brief stay. 2 years after the humans left, the Vorthak received distress calls from the Kepler 186 system where they had directed the lost explorers. When Vorthak rescue ships arrived, they found 5 dead worlds with no trace of the civilizations that had lived there. The planets looked like they had been stripped of all organic material. Even the bacteria in the soil was gone. Similar incidents were recorded throughout Vorthak history. Human ships would appear asking for help, and the Vorthak would assist them out of compassion. Within a few years, entire star systems in the direction the humans had traveled would go silent. Investigation teams would find dead worlds with all life consumed. The pattern repeated itself dozens of times over the centuries. Amy translated a section that described a Vorthak scientific expedition that had followed human ships at a safe distance. The report was written by a xenobiologist named Kethvar, who had observed human behavior on a planet called Haven Prime. According to the document, the humans had not attacked the native population directly. Instead, they had introduced diseases and environmental changes that slowly killed the ecosystem. The report described humans as biological weapons disguised as explorers. According to Kethvar, humans carried microorganisms that were harmless to themselves but deadly to other forms of life. Wherever humans established settlements, these microorganisms would spread through the environment and gradually kill everything else on the planet. The humans probably did not even realize they were causing mass extinctions. Steve found this explanation hard to believe and asked Amy to translate more sections of the scientific reports. What they discovered was even more disturbing than intentional genocide. The Vorthak scientists had concluded that humans were not deliberately destroying other civilizations. Instead, they were carriers of some kind of biological plague that they spread unconsciously wherever they traveled. The archives contained biological samples that Vorthak scientists had collected from dead worlds. These samples showed traces of Earth-based microorganisms that had adapted to alien environments. The bacteria and viruses had evolved to consume non-terrestrial organic matter with incredible efficiency. Within years of human contact, these microorganisms would spread across entire planets and consume all native life. Jake realized that this explained why the galactic community had avoided contact with Earth for so long. They were not afraid of human military power or aggressive expansion. They were afraid of being accidentally exterminated by diseases that humans carried without knowing it. From the perspective of other species, humanity was a walking plague that killed everything it touched. Amy found records of the most recent Vorthak encounters with humans before the colony attacks. Vorthak long-range sensors had been monitoring human expansion into space for decades. They had watched human ships traveling between Earth, Mars, and the outer planets. The aliens had also observed human terraforming projects and orbital construction. According to these records, the Vorthak leadership had reached a unanimous decision 3 years ago. Humanity was preparing to expand beyond their home system and begin exploring the galaxy. Based on their historical records, the Vorthak believed this would lead to the eventual extinction of all galactic civilization. The attacks on human colonies were desperate attempts to contain the threat before it could spread. Tony asked why the Vorthak had not simply contacted Earth and explained the situation. Amy translated a section that answered this question. Previous attempts to warn species about the human plague had failed, because most civilizations did not believe the threat was real until it was too late. The Vorthak had decided that direct action was the only way to protect the galaxy from human expansion. Jake sat in the archive building reading these translated documents and feeling sick to his stomach. Everything he had believed about this. War was backwards. Humanity was not the victim of alien aggression. They were the threat that the galaxy was trying to contain. The Vorthak were not savage predators. They were desperate defenders trying to protect their civilization from extinction. As Jake looked around at his squad, he saw the same realization dawning on their faces. They had volunteered to fight aliens who were attacking human colonies. Instead, they had discovered that humanity was the monster that other species told scary stories about. The real question was what they should do with this knowledge and whether there was any way to prevent the apocalypse that the galaxy expected humans to bring. That night, Jake could not sleep, and he walked through the occupied city looking at the Vorthak civilians who had surrendered to his species. These aliens were not his enemies. They were his victims. Everything that the human fleet accomplished in this war was just confirming the worst fears that the galaxy had about humanity. Jake wondered if there was any way to prove that humans could be something other than the plague carriers that the ancient records described. 3 months after the discovery in the Vorthak archives, Jake found himself standing in the Grand Assembly Chamber of the Galactic Council on the space station called Unity Prime. The chamber was enormous with seating for representatives from 47 different species. Each delegation sat in specially designed areas that accommodated their unique physiological needs. The air was carefully filtered to allow multiple atmospheric requirements, and the lighting was adjusted to be comfortable for various types of vision. Jake wore his dress uniform and stood with the other human delegates behind Admiral Collins. Captain Warren was there along with Dr. Brooks and several other senior officers from the expedition. Across from them sat the Vorthak delegation led by High Administrator Zefkol, who had been their primary negotiator during the surrender talks. The alien looked tired and resigned as it waited for the council to begin their final session. High Coordinator Vex High called the assembly to order and began speaking in the ceremonial language that was used for important galactic decisions. Jake had learned enough of the language during their journey to understand the basic meaning. This session would determine humanity's place in the galactic community and establish the terms for permanent peace with the Vorthak civilization. The formal presentations began with each species stating their position on the human question. The reptilian Zephyrians spoke about their concerns regarding human biological contamination. They had studied the archived evidence and believed that humans posed an existential threat to all galactic life. Their recommendation was to quarantine Earth and prevent any human expansion beyond their home system. The insectoid Helix delegation presented a different perspective. They argued that humanity had demonstrated restraint and honor during the recent conflict. Human forces had treated Vorthak prisoners with dignity and had not engaged in the wholesale slaughter that the ancient record suggested was typical human behavior. The Helix believed that humans had evolved beyond their destructive past and deserved a chance to prove themselves. Other species presented various opinions, ranging from complete isolation of humanity to full integration into the galactic community. Jake listened to these debates and realized that the galaxy was deeply divided about what to do with his species. Some aliens saw humans as monsters who needed to be contained, while others viewed them as potential allies who could be redeemed. When it was time for the human delegation to speak, Admiral Collins rose and addressed the assembly. The admiral was an older man with gray hair and serious eyes who had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. He spoke clearly and directly about humanity's desire to join the galactic community as peaceful partners rather than conquerors. The admiral acknowledged the historical evidence about human expansion and the dead worlds that had been left in their wake. He explained that modern humans had developed technologies to prevent biological contamination and had established protocols to protect alien ecosystems. Humanity was willing to accept restrictions on their expansion and submit to galactic oversight of their activities. Dr. Brooks was called to present the scientific evidence about human evolution. She explained that the humans who had caused the ancient extinctions were from a different era, when Earth's population was smaller and less technologically advanced. Modern humans had developed immune system controls and sterilization procedures that would prevent the spread of harmful microorganisms to alien worlds. High Administrator Zefkol responded for the Vorthak delegation. The alien's voice was soft and musical as it spoke about the terror that humanity had inspired in their civilization for thousands of years. Zefkol acknowledged that the recent human behavior had been more restrained than expected, but questioned whether this change was permanent or simply a temporary adaptation to galactic scrutiny. Jake was surprised when High Coordinator Vex High called him forward to address the assembly. As a junior officer, Jake had not expected to have a voice in these proceedings. Vex High explained that Jake represented the new generation of humans who would be responsible for implementing whatever decision the council reached. His perspective was important because he would help determine whether humanity could live up to their promises. Jake looked out at the assembled representatives of dozens of alien species and felt the weight of their expectations. He spoke about his experiences during the war and how they had changed his understanding of humanity's nature. Jake acknowledged that humans had the capacity for both creation and destruction. The question was not whether humans were dangerous, but whether they could choose to use their abilities for the benefit of the galaxy rather than its harm. During the break, Jake walked through the station's observation decks and looked out at the stars. Tony, Amy, and Steve joined him there, and they talked about how much their lives had changed since volunteering for military service. They had expected to fight alien monsters and instead discovered that they were the monsters that other species feared. Now they had to decide what kind of monsters they wanted to be. When the assembly reconvened, High Coordinator Vex High announced the council's decision. By a narrow margin, the galactic community had voted to accept humanity as provisional members with specific restrictions. Humans would be allowed to establish colonies in designated star systems, but would be prohibited from entering certain sectors. Without permission, all human settlements would be subject to biological monitoring to prevent contamination of alien ecosystems. The most significant part of the decision was humanity's new role in galactic affairs. The Council had voted to make humans the official peacekeeping force for the galaxy. When diplomatic solutions failed and military intervention was necessary, other species would call upon human forces to resolve conflicts. Humanity would become the enforcers of galactic law and the protectors of weaker civilizations. Vexhai explained the reasoning behind this decision. Since humans were already feared throughout the galaxy, it made sense to channel that fear toward maintaining peace. Other species would be less likely to engage in aggressive expansion or territorial disputes if they knew that human forces would intervene. Humanity's reputation as unstoppable warriors would become a deterrent against galactic warfare. Jake understood that the Council was asking humans to embrace their nature as predators while using that nature to protect prey species. It was a clever solution that acknowledged human dangerousness while directing it toward constructive purposes. Instead of being quarantined as monsters, humans would become the guardians of galactic civilization. Admiral Collins accepted the Council's offer on behalf of humanity. The human delegation signed formal agreements establishing the terms of their membership and defining their responsibilities as galactic peacekeepers. Jake watched as representatives from dozens of species added their approval to the documents that would govern human activity for generations to come. As the ceremony concluded, Jake realized that he had witnessed a historic moment. Humanity had finally taken its place among the stars, but not as the peaceful explorers they had imagined themselves to be. Instead, they had become the galaxy's appointed predators, the species that other civilizations would call upon when violence was necessary to maintain order. 3 weeks later, Jake stood on the bridge of his new ship, the UFS Sentinel, as it departed for patrol duties in the Outer Rim territories. He had been promoted to commander and given responsibility for maintaining peace in a sector that contained 12 different species. His squad from the Vorthak War had volunteered to serve under his command, and they were now the senior staff of a peacekeeping vessel. As Jake looked out at the stars ahead, he thought about the choice that humanity had made. They could have tried to prove that they were not the monsters from the ancient stories. Instead, they had chosen to become monsters with a purpose, protectors who used their fearsome reputation to prevent wars rather than start them. It was not the future that Jake had imagined when he first volunteered, but it was perhaps the only future that made sense. The galaxy slept peacefully knowing that humanity was watching over it, and that was both the most comforting and most terrifying thought in the universe. Jake had joined humanity's fight expecting to defend innocent colonists from alien predators. Instead, he had discovered that humanity itself was the predator that the galaxy had been waiting for. Now he would spend the rest of his career making sure that other species remembered why they should fear the children of Earth.